This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we bring you information, insights, ideas, and interviews from some of the industry's top thought leaders. Head to mediasalesmastery.com to help pick the topic and guide the show.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. I'm Jamie Wood, feeling a lot better than the last episode. I didn't have to wake up at some super early hour of the morning to coordinate. Our topic today, persuasive sales proposals. Now, we have covered this topic off in the past, but I wanted to take the opportunity to really reinforce some of the principles of best practice proposal writing. You could have the best client relationship, the best product, the biggest audience. You could have the best solution. You could have the best price value equation in the market. But if your proposal fails to capture and articulate any of this, then everything else is actually irrelevant. Many great revenue opportunities are missed daily due to lackluster proposals. There was a recent study by Persuasive, and it captured a number of key insights from a review of nearly 1.6 million sales proposals. The key takeout for me, alarmingly, was the average time spent reviewing a proposal significantly shorter than you may realize. And I'm not talking 5 to 15 minutes, I'm talking like 90 seconds to 2.5 minutes. Clearly there's a difference when it comes to presenting versus sending across. But either way, we clearly have short attention spans, and we need to really be mindful of the audience that we are presenting to or sending a proposal to. The data also showed that proposals with 2 to 13 pages of content actually had significantly higher close rates than proposals with more. So there is a rationale here, and there is a revenue upside to getting this right. Making sure your proposal is brief, it's customized, it's solution focused, it follows a clear structure based on the specific buyer that you are targeting are just a few of the topics we're going to cover off today. I just recorded the episode with Pitt from Realizer. One of my favorite chats I've had so far. She's an absolute gun. And this is a topic we probably could speak a lot more about in future episodes, but it's a great foundational discussion to have. Now, I promise not to do too many side plugs, but I do have one. Although I'm out of the radio industry, COVID actually prohibited me from traveling to Malaysia last year to present at Radio Days Asia, which was going to be a nice bookend to my time in radio and a nice kind of career milestone. That event is running virtually. It's been postponed. It's actually happening now in late March. So if you are going to that event, please check out my session. I'd love to get some feedback. It's a punchy 13-minute presentation. It's all about better commercialization of digital, in this case for radio. However, I really think that it's a great sort of opportunity also to promote the podcast. So if you're heading along, check out my session. Please give me feedback, and please let me know if you'd like me to present the keynote to anyone in your teams as well. Okay, that's as much spam as you're going to get from me. We're going to jump into the main topic right now.
The first 5.
Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
It's really good to have you here, and it feels like reflecting just on your experience before we started recording. This topic is very much in your sweet spot. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background in media, and what you do at Realizer.
Well, my current role is at Realizer, so I'm a trainer and facilitator there and have been doing that since 2015. And majority of our work is with companies within the media and marketing space. So we do a lot with media agencies, creative agencies, and also a lot of media owners as well. And that largely has come about because my experience prior to working as a trainer was actually within the media industry. So the first 9 years of my professional career was within media agencies, where I worked at Mediacom and and then after that I spent 6 years at Fairfax in the commercial strategy team. So yeah, this space around training around sales proposals and presenting and sort of stuff is what I spend a lot of time these days helping people with.
It's funny, I think my exposure certainly to your company was through Rob Pine, who was engaged at my previous employer to come in and basically overhaul the way that the sales team were building proposals and also just pitching them in market. And I can remember off the back of that, it was almost like a shortcut to success. Like, it was a really what seemed like a relatively small part of a much broader sales process, but it really can't be understated how important that proposal document actually is in terms of conversion of revenue. Is that I guess a fair observation in your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. These proposals are so important. It's how you're pitching and presenting your ideas and your company. And if we think about the media agencies or the clients that are receiving them, they are seeing so many of these. And so the ability to stand out from the crowd is hugely beneficial. And I think a lot within the training that Rob and I do is we do try and provide these shortcuts and templates to help salespeople stand out. We appreciate, you guys are really busy. We remember the days where we were sitting in your shoes as well. So we try and provide lots of shortcuts and insights into how to not only generate your proposals really efficiently, but also make them best in class and stand out from the rest.
Media Sales Mastery.
I just think about the scenario that a lot of media salespeople, particularly ones who are listeners of this podcast and who do send feedback, this seems to be an area where a lot of people do struggle. Either the business gives them a really rigid preset sort of template that they almost do like a stock standard copy and paste job.
Yep.
Other times it's a case of going, I've got so much disparate information. How do I actually pull this together into a bit more of a narrative or something that feels logical and the structure feels right? And then there's a lot of other people that I think fall down the trap of just speaking too much about themselves, like not actually understanding that it's about creating a solution for the client and providing sort of the context as to how you believe your solution is going to deliver on the client's objectives. So maybe we might start at the very beginning, Michelle. As a media salesperson, they're sitting down to start constructing that sales proposal. Before they start building, what pre-work should have been done and what information, should they have on hand to be able to then commence the build?
Yeah, and it's a really good place to start because I think so many people, we lunge straight into it and we go straight to trying to figure out the solution and the answers, and we need to really take a step back. The first thing I always tell people is they need to ask questions to the client. Invariably, briefs are... they may not be clear, there may be not enough information, there may be too much information. Sometimes you get a brief that appears to have, like 7 objectives. So actually going back and to your client and asking a few questions and really clarifying that you understand what is the main priority and what they're really looking for. And that can be lost in a written brief. So actually sort of having that conversation and asking the questions. I always tell people to don't just ask detailed questions about what's my budget and timings and so forth, but actually ask bigger picture questions like what does success look like, and what are you hoping to achieve here, and really find out the bigger picture. And once you feel really confident that you've asked all the questions and you've got a really clear understanding of the brief, I always start with telling people they've got to answer 2 questions. And that is if they think about their client, whether that's, the specific person at the agency, and you say to yourself, okay, what do they currently think now? So what do they think about my, media sales house or my publisher? What do they think about us now as an offering in market? And then by the end of my proposal or presentation, what do I want them to think, feel, or do? And if you really get clear in your head of where are they now, in the terms of they probably, they don't, if you work in radio, do they buy into radio as a platform for their brand or whatever it is? And then by the end of the presentation, what do I want them to think, feel, or do? And it gives you real clarity on where you have to get that person to. Because obviously at the end of your sales proposal, you want action. You want them to do something. So you need to be really clear in your head of the journey you need to take them on to get the desired result. And that will help you really frame up your proposal and be really sharp on what you put in there.
I think that's an amazing insight around, particularly asking what is the current perception and how do I sort of want to move them through that? Because I do think that, one of the biggest challenges I'm seeing with media salespeople is that the product suite we're selling across is becoming broader. It's becoming more complex. There are more assets making their way on the schedule. There's a lot more just components to campaigns. Like we are seeing a maturation of the media market, particularly in traditional publishers that are sort of now broadening out their offering. So, I kind of think a lot of the time it's even a challenge just to squeeze what a media salesperson thinks is all the relevant content into a proposal just to show the elements of the campaign. It might sort of lead to the next question around duration of a sales proposal. I've seen many salespeople who are selling complex solutions struggle to keep the page count under about 30 or 40 slides. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm sure you see it all the time too. Like just at a pure sort of simplified level, thinking about the broad kind of suite of clients that you work across, what sort of slide count should people be aiming for? And what are some tips to start to keep things in that range?
Yeah, so I always say to people as few as possible. With your proposals, you want to keep them really tight and clear and succinct to the point. I think sometimes we fall into a trap of if we haven't done sufficient planning, our slide decks can really blow out in terms of the number of slides because we think, I don't know if I know that, or should I just put it in or not? And so we put it in. So if we've really answered the first question of where are they now and where do I need to get them to, that often helps, sort of reducing the slide count. I remember being at Fairfax and getting a brief from an agency, and within the brief, it was a big budget brief, and they wanted a big new idea, and within it, they said, you've only got 5 slides to pitch us back to. And we were almost having conniptions saying, how on earth can we do this in 5 slides? And it possibly was the hardest proposal I ever did, but I must admit by the end of it, it was the best. We were so forced to be so clear on our thinking and no fluff and get to the point. So I would be really encouraging people to go as few as possible. And focus your efforts on the idea and what the idea will deliver rather than all the lead up and the build up slides. Really focus in on the big idea and what results it'll drive for the client. But yeah, if you can be getting it to say 10 to 15 slides, then, I think you're in a good spot.
It's a really good call out there. I mean, for an agency to sit there and go, we need to see it in this format of 5, probably because of the fact that we don't have the time or bandwidth to sit there and curate 7 publishers with 40 slide decks down into the core elements to then present our recommendations to the client.
Yeah.
It does reflect the tension that obviously exists there where, we do as probably media suppliers almost feel like, look, let's put more than less. It feels almost like a high risk strategy to put less, but did it kind of at the end of that, did it feel more like a show of confidence, to have those 5 slides and to really proudly be able to say this is the whole thing?
Oh, yeah, it was a huge achievement. And I think what we need to realize as media sales professionals is you've been briefed for a reason. So obviously they think that there is a fit, you know what I mean, for the brand. So there's a certain level of why they have briefed you has already been done. So you don't need to essentially go into a huge amount of detail, you know what I mean, on why you may be a relevant partner. What they want to see is the solution, and why it'll work. I remember being media agency side and used to get proposals, and I used to flick through slides, and I used to just turn because I'd be like, where's the idea? I just want the idea. And to your point, it is you've briefed out multiple publishers. You're trying to compare them all, which is difficult. And so you're just really honing in on, where's the idea, who can deliver what the brand needs.
Yeah, and I think we're sort of jumping into the question I was going to ask, which was around customization of templates, because it is an area of hot debate. Some media salespeople have access to very specific pre-built templates, that are in company branding, that don't offer a whole lot of reformatting or customization. A lot of other media salespeople are saying, particularly in the last 12 months, like response times have pretty much halved. So we're just bound by time constraints. We can't necessarily do more than a very basic copy and paste job. So I was kind of curious to maybe explore a little bit more that topic of customization and talk about that tension that exists between time spent building a proposal versus potential return on investment. Is there a balance we should be aiming for in the current sort of trading environment we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've been briefed in on a really big budget, then, you want to be spending that time customizing it. Aesthetics matter, and people, the more visuals there are for a solution, the better, because people can actually then visualize it coming to life, and they can see how it may work with their brand. But I totally appreciate the turnaround times, and sometimes, as you say, you can't customize your decks and they're fixed and it comes from the business that this is the deck and, you need to take it out. And that's where we train people that it's really your narrative over and above the deck. So when you're out talking in market, you need to think about, well, I can't physically change the slides, but what I can do is what I say and my narrative to the client as I'm presenting, that's really tailored. So you can show them the slides, but then it's always like, well, this is what it means for you. And this is what it, is doing for your brand, rather than just reading or presenting the slides as they've been generically written.
One of the things that I think we really miss a trick here of, think about some of the best presentations you've ever seen. Very rarely is it a text-rich, visual. It's very often a simple visual with a headline and then a really beautiful, narrative supporting it and speaking about it.
Yeah.
I think particularly when you are trying to present to a room, having that really busy slide and having the words and whatnot, it's like you just lose the room before you've even had an opportunity to actually get them to take in what it is you're saying.
Yeah, you completely do. So people can read 4 times faster than you can speak. So what happens is if you have a slide with heaps of text on it, and we do that because it's like a security blanket, so we don't forget, to make any points. But you have to think, all that's happening is you're presenting, you're talking, nobody's listening to you, they're just reading the slide, okay? And they read the slide, and then they tune out until you go to the next slide. So to your point, if you are actually standing up and presenting an idea, you want the audience focused on you, because you yourself can sell the idea much better than a slide can. So you want to have as little information or as little text on the slides as possible so they stay focused on you and what you're saying.
And I think we also find, particularly when we're talking about those pre-built templates that are supplied by a company, which again, it's great to have that kind of collateral, but an observation I'd make in my time is that a lot of the sales proposals end up then being very heavy on product, on features, on benefits. They don't really allow for the ability to sell a bespoke solution for that client. I mean, is that the reason, or do you think there's something else at play? Like, why do we have this tendency to focus on using a proposal to sell a product rather than a solution? And maybe in your time consulting to media businesses, what sort of impact have you seen from really changing that approach towards solution-based proposal writing?
Yeah, so I think it is definitely something people are striving for. I think, to be honest, we as media salespeople, we know our own products. So it's a really it's a comfortable place to be. Okay, you know your products really well. You can talk about your products inside out. And there is obviously an education piece that you want to be doing in market because you want everybody to be aware of, your products and your offering. But I think we rely too much on the product and not the solution. And we have to remember that the client's brand is the center of the story, not your products. And your products is just the aid to support them. Essentially, if we think about the client's brand is the hero and they're on a journey and they've got some challenges, and your products can just help them get there and help them solve their challenges. So therefore, it becomes the solution that's the story, and it's the solution to the brand's problems or challenges. And I think having that sort of mindset is going to help us get more solution focused, and thinking about it's just my products that can help that journey rather than be the hero themselves.
I love that. I mean, expanding on that, so you're really talking about narrative You're talking about a story there. There's a character arc, there's a first, second, and third act. Is there a rough structure that most proposals should follow in terms of those kind of key steps in the story? What would be the ideal sequencing of a standard media proposal? Obviously, the caveat being that all proposals should be somewhat different or bespoke, but is there sort of an ideal layout?
Yeah, well, what we teach is when we do this, we look at the greatest storytellers of all time is that in movies, okay? And we keep going back to the movies time and time again because we feel good, we love the story, we remember them. And so we actually look at, we call it the hero's journey, and it is a typical 6-step storyline that most movies play out and then you can translate that into business, okay? And so essentially, you meet the hero, which would be the client's brand. Every day we discover their current reality. One day something dramatic happens, so that may be the big challenge that brand's trying to overcome, until we go on a journey. So we go on this quest to find a solution until finally, we come up with a big idea and we all live happily ever after. And so that is, we can translate that story into our proposals, and it takes the client on that journey, right? And we create some tension and some drama, and we find that really works. It becomes memorable. And it's a really great sort of narrative to formulate your own proposals in.
I love that. Do they ever have the dramatic thing in the third act where the implementation of the campaign all falls down and it all goes to hell? I feel like that's really interesting hearing that, because I actually have a good friend of mine who works in the film industry, and he shared this with me, and it almost ruined films for me for a while, where he said there's actually 7 original stories that you can tell, and every movie is effectively one of those 7 story arcs. And I think the example he used was Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas, Avatar, I think about 3 or 4 other really well-known movies. If you were to actually read the narrative structure, are fundamentally the same story. Yeah. But in a way, I actually think that's what's quite exciting about what we do in media, is that it's about how do we then make that fresh and relevant and apply that arc to the client's brand and the client's brief. Yeah,
exactly. And, when I train people on it, it is the same thing. You're saying, I'm sorry I'm ruining it for you, but pretty much all movies follow these 6 steps, It's all the same, but it's like, we keep going back for more. We love it, as humans. And so let's apply this, to your selling as well, to become more memorable and more persuasive, with your ideas. There's one other structure that we teach as well, which I call it, it's like a Bond film. So Bond films always open with like some action, and a big exciting scene. And then we find out the backstory, right? So then, the Bond films then go back and they explain the backstory of what happened to get to that action scene. And so we call that for presentations and proposal writing, we call that like cut to the chase, where you would just open with your big idea, like bang, this is our big idea, get people excited. And then you go back,
sell the rationale.
Yeah, and then you go back to explain, well, this is how we got there. So that's another twist on it you can do.
Yeah, we actually, I'm not sure if you know Wade Kingsley from the Ideas Business.
Yep.
He was a guest on the podcast around selling an idea, and he had a very similar thought process around, it's not just about selling the idea, sell the story of how you arrived at it, which I just thought was it really sort of dovetails nicely into what you're talking about here, of going, here's the big idea, but, we first thought about it, then we uncovered this, then we went and spoke to these people, and this is what we found interesting, and there we went, then we veered off and thought about this, but then we got back to a more moderate ground, and that's what's arrived here. That kind of stuff to me just really can't be understated, how powerful in a pitch that can feel, if for no other reason than to give the client some assurance that you've really done your homework and you've actually, spent time to really unpack what it is they're trying to achieve. That kind of stuff to me, I just feel like the theatre, if you will, it is what based on my observation, separates those really strong pitches from those very underwhelming, very clinical presentations.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, take people on that journey of your thought path. As clients, they're kind of wired to look at a proposal and critique it, right? And want to change something about it. Where if you take them on your journey of, well, we thought about this and then we thought, no, actually that won't work because of blah, blah. So we've done a alliteration. And if you take them on the journey of how your idea evolved, the psychology behind that is they're far more likely to go, oh yeah, you're right. You've done all these alliterations and where you've landed is an awesome idea. Rather than just saying, this is where we've landed, then our human nature is to go, okay, well, I probably need to critique that and pull it apart a bit.
Well, I think also, sometimes the production value that people think they need to bring to a proposal can almost overcome a bad structure or a bad solution. Like, we're using all these amazing visuals and we've got these great mocks and we've got this big bold text and it just looks beautiful visually. But I do feel, to your point earlier, like aesthetics do matter. They really do. Can you talk a bit about the role of visuals, text, animation, headings, appendices, utilizing appendice links? Like, what are some of the tools or tips that can, with these features that can ensure that the proposal just has that maximum impact?
Yeah, so I think the more visuals, the better. The more people can visualize what, the end solution or the end creative will look like, the better. I think you have to be really honest with yourself of, are you creating a presentation or a document? Okay, and sometimes it is a document that's needed. So a document is a lot more text heavy. It's something that would probably be sent over because someone else needs to read it and understand it. So if that's what you're producing, that is totally fine, and there will be cases to do that. But if you are presenting it, and it is a presentation, then you don't want to have all the text on the slide. As I said before, people will just be reading instead of listening to you. So a lot of less text. Animations on slides, I'm not a huge fan personally. If they're really simple, we don't want too much animations. Your headings should tell the story. So there is a rule that somebody should be able to just read the headings of a presentation and understand, get the gist, you know. And so don't have, a slide heading as competitor analysis or, you know what I mean, something like that, like actually give some sort of insight. And, in terms of appendixes, I think it's the most underutilized space. It really just becomes a dumping ground for slides that maybe were in the presentation that we dropped out and we're not quite sure. So I really encourage people to use the appendix as a place where you can say to people, today I'm presenting and, we're going to be looking at big picture, blue sky, but I've got all the detail. It's in the appendix if you want to see it later, and have it much more structured rather than a dumping ground.
I do love that. I mean, to me, a really, really well curated appendix is a very understated tool for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, you want to make sure that it's easy for somebody reviewing the document to go and see that the information's there and to find it. But it also just gives that level, almost that safety net of like the complexity has been taken care of, guys. It's there, but today we want to devote this 20 minutes, which is all we potentially are going to take here, maybe less, to speaking conceptually, to speaking big picture, to getting you bought into the actual overarching narrative that we've created here. You can go back and post-rationalize our idea to yourself if all the data's there. I do think it's a really key call out. I mean, myself, even not that I'm professed to be a great deck builder, but certainly presenting a lot, I really like the ability to even tactfully jump to the appendix from time to time, almost just to kind of show the contents there and it's available, but then to jump back into the actual preso. Yeah.
Because there are going to be people in the room that are the big picture. They don't want the detail. They just want to be sold the dream. They want to be, they want to get excited. And then there are going to be people that are all about the detail, and it's, they're varying different roles and personality types. But to your point, if you can set up the meeting saying, this is what we're going to do, but we've got all the detail, those detail-orientated people can then actually just sit back and relax and enjoy the presentation rather than interrupting you or feeling uneasy, how did you get to that or something. So, yeah, it's a great thing to do.
It's also interesting hearing what you said around, because I agree, like the odd stock standard heading on a slide versus being able to use that really strategically to make sure that slide has maximum impact. I remember there was I can't remember where I saw it. It was on LinkedIn, and it was sort of that, going back to your point around that 5 slide parameter that was set on you, like the job of every slide should really be like make a point, prove it, and then just, basically summarize what it means for the brand. I remember like that really resonated with me. And sometimes the question that I think we have to ask ourselves is, what is this slide actually doing? Like, is it one key point, or are we trying to jam 6 or 7 messages into one slide? Is that something that you come across a lot too? Like people almost just trying to jam too much into the one, the one part of the proposal?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's because sometimes we're not quite sure, we're not confident in our idea. So we try and cover all bases. Or we're trying to go, client, this is the 35 reasons why this will work. And what you do is you actually just really dilute, your message. And as humans, then they will walk away not remembering anything. I always tell people the rule of 3. We have difficulty remembering more than 3 things. And so if you look at any politicians or great speech writers, there's always 3 reasons to support them or 3 things they're going to do, and that's because it's something that we can remember. It shows authority. It shows that they've done due diligence. So I always say to people, keep it simple. This is the 3 reasons why you should do this, or the 3 reasons it will work, and that will be far more powerful than, as I say, this, long list, which then nothing will stand out on.
It's such a good point. I mean, the likes of Steve Jobs, certainly any good politician, they do use the rule of 3. I think even the team that I'm currently leading, our strategy is really based around 3 pillars. And the analogy that we ended up using to arrive at our strategy was the idea of going, if I said to you, give me a plan to be healthy, like how are you going to be healthy? I mean, it's like take your vitamins, eat this, eat to a macro thing, track your food, sleep 8 to 10 hours. It's infinite. Or you could really dumb it down to, sleep 8 to 10 hours, eat to the 80-20 rule, and exercise 3 to 5 times a week. That kind of stuff to me is like really powerful. It's almost going, if you're putting a solution to a client, or if you're pitching an idea, or if you're just dissecting a brief down to its core elements, like how do you actually batch things together in a way that can fall under, those kind of themes? How do you set the agenda of today? There's 3 things we're going to talk to you about in crafting your solution. I really feel like it's a great mechanism almost to get that early buy-in when you set the agenda to even just manage their expectations around these are effectively the 3 things we're going to talk about. Probably leads me to a side question, and I'm rambling a bit here, but I'm loving the convo. What's the ideal way of maybe setting an agenda up for a presentation? Is that an underutilized slide? Do people just go with the stock standard, or can that be used as a really powerful way to set up and engage the audience?
Yeah, I think it is really important to have it in there. I think as an audience, we like to know what we're in for. So we don't want to be sitting in a presentation thinking, I've got no idea how long this is going to go for. I've got no idea what they're going to cover. We kind of get that little sense of uneasiness. So
yeah,
I think really having that agenda, setting people up saying, I'm going to take half an hour of your time, and I've got these 3 amazing ideas to show you, or this is what I'm going to cover off. And it really enables people to go, okay, cool, I can strap in, and, I'm ready and I know what I'm in for. And enable them to really lean in to your presentation. I wouldn't have a really generic, agenda slide saying we'll do the objectives and then we'll recap your brief and then we'll do this. And, that's just quite boring. But if you set them up for what they're about to hear about, or, you can say of, this great idea or solution that we've come up with, and, even like sort of named up across the business, this is who's been pulled in to come up with this, and give them a sense of what's to come, and, the work that's gone in behind it, will kind of get them excited of what's to come.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I suppose, in rounding out the main topic, for anyone in the audience, and we're really lucky, like I actually have done a couple of webinars recently with some groups, one in Sri Lanka, one in South Africa, and it just feels like no matter where in the world people are selling media, everyone has the same problems or challenges. And I know building proposals is a constant one. It's sort of, I suppose, trying to pull this down into a sort of a workable takeaway for the audience. For people who maybe are currently building sales proposals as part of their role, and maybe they want to do a quick self-reflection or a self-audit on their work, what would you say are some of those key questions that they should be asking when reviewing a proposal that they've built in order to make it better?
Yeah, so I think, going back to what I mentioned earlier, really thinking about what do they currently think and what do I want them to think, feel, or do at the end, and really getting clear on that. And then looking over it and asking yourself, have I made this easy to buy and easy to execute? So I think a lot of ideas may be great, but then they quickly sort of go, oh, that actually is already in the too hard basket. So there's already too much I have to do, or there's too much unknowns. And so I would make it as easy as possible to buy. And I would also showcase how you, as the media sales person, is going to ensure that it's really easy and smooth. So whether you say this is how it will be implemented, or we've got this specialist Bob in-house and he is a gun at X and he's going to project manage this for you. So then you're actually putting a face or a person to the solution that is going to make it easy and smooth for the client. Because really, if we've got to remember that, the media activity it's a small part of a big pie, right? There's lots of different activity going on. So we need to be really consciously making sure that this is really easy to buy and they're not feeling it's onerous.
It's such a good call out right now, and I've said this ad nauseum, but I think in the current environment, it's really important that ease of transaction and, that easy to sell for, easy to buy from is a priority for everybody. The big idea, it might actually be the best idea. However, we have to read the room right now and go, if it feels like any of this is ancillary, if this is going to get jammed up with legal, if this is going to require a lot of heavy lifting from other people in the agency and or the client, it's going to feel like it's creating drag in a market where we just don't have the bandwidth for it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great call out to not only sell the solution, but also to ensure that you can allay concerns around the implementation. It's one thing to sell a great idea, but if you can't execute, you will very quickly be found out, and that can be really, can really damage credibility quite quickly, as I've learnt over many years.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fantastic suggestion on that one.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
All right, we're into the final topic, Michelle. I feel like we could talk all night about this. It's clearly a common theme coming from the audience too. So both on SurveyMonkey, on LinkedIn, and this individual actually wrote a review on Apple Podcasts, but in the review they had a question for us in relation to proposals. So here it is.
Hey Jamie, love the podcast. I have a question about proposals. I sell media advertising to a large multinational agency. They always ask for a detailed proposal with every brief, but also flag that they usually only include 2 to 3 key slides per medium in their client proposal. I have 2 questions. How can I make it easy for them to summarize my proposal into theirs? And can I hack the system somehow?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there is a way to hack the system. So first off, I would ask them, if we haven't already, ask them, what slides do you put in? What do you want me to do? Can I create those 2 slides? for you. So if you think make their life as easy as possible. I remember when I was working media agency side, I had a rep who started doing all her proposals and even the media plans. She was using my agency template. So I didn't even have to reformat any of her stuff to put it into my proposal. And you know how time poor I was. It was just like a dream. But she was so smart. It was just such an easy copy-paste from her into my work. So I think if you can deliver your recommendation or your proposal in the agency's templates, it's a good win. And just be really clear on why it'll work, because that's what, the agencies are then taking your recommendations and going to the client, recommending them. And the biggest thing they are doing is saying, we recommend X media owner because it will work, right? And so if you can have really clearly articulated the why it will work, they're not having to, to write that and do it, and it'll make it really easy for them.
So in your time as a agency person who was then presenting to a client, how much of a deck would typically make its way into your deck? Like, would it be that you would, similar to what this individual was kind of calling out, like it would be that you really only had 1 to 2 slides per medium to really kind of sell the entire solution they'd presented to you?
Yeah, I think it often would. That would happen if you were doing a big campaign across multiple mediums. 2 to 3 slides per medium. That sounds right to me. Because if you think the agency people are setting up a presentation where they're doing the strategy, they're doing the recommendation, and they then whiz through the different mediums of how it's going to be delivered. Some campaigns are really focused on just 1 medium or 2 mediums, so obviously that's different, you know what I mean? There is a lot more detail and rigor around it, but yeah, it would often happen. And I know with a lot of the clients I worked on, there'd be one big meeting and the media agency would present and the creative agent would present and the PR agency would present, all our recommendations on the same campaign in the room together, one after another. So we had to all be pretty succinct, yeah, because there was a lot to get through.
Yeah, it's, from time to time with teams I've had, we've dabbled in the idea of not so much an executive summary, but almost like a pitch on a page. So kind of going, whatever the proposal is, build it, provide it, present it. But if you have the time, think about whether you can actually summarize effectively what the solution is into a 1, maybe 2-page document to then accompany your proposal when you send it across. It surprisingly got some great feedback early on. The challenge we had, I think, was the certain salespeople saw it as a shortcut to the proposal, and I was always like, no, it's not to replace the proposal. It's there as an aid to make it easier for your agency partner to perhaps on-present to people. But I was always curious how that would be received agency side, and whether it was, whether it really had utility, or whether it sort of maybe didn't land us trying to kind of do that.
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to asking the individuals. Probably different individuals in media agencies, depending on their clients, may find it more useful than others. I think when I was agency side, I would have loved it because I would have probably read that first. And if that sounded really good, then I'd read the whole proposal, if you know what I mean. Yep. So that might have been my way of going, is this really worth my time? You know what I mean? Really investing in your whole deck because I'm time poor. So that could have been a
double-edged sword almost.
Yeah. But yeah, it would have, the more they can get help and shortcut into their client presentations, I think they're always looking for that.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable. I mean, I think to your point, like sometimes just asking the question and not being afraid to, like, how would you, is this going to be easy enough for you to on-present to the client? Is there anything we can do to support or make it easier? One thing we've implemented in my team recently was just a bit of a prop cross-check, and usually trying to get a fresh set of eyes, somebody who wasn't part of the initial brief or the build, just to make sure that when presented to them fresh, before taking it to the client, they can understand it. You know, those types of things are really worth considering in terms of putting focus on your proposals, just if only to stress test the bigger ones and just to make sure that they really do feel like there's something that somebody could come in cold and still completely understand what it is you're putting forward.
I think we fall into the trap when we work on a proposal. We're so involved in it and we're part of the ideation of it that we know it inside out and back to front, that we presume it's really obvious because it is to us. But you've got to think about your audience, and this is the first time they've ever seen it. You know, they haven't been through this process with you. So, you do that. Being really explicit and clear is so important. And so, to your point, having someone else read it that's outside the team, or, you know, even have your partner read it that doesn't even work in the industry and say, do you understand what I'm trying to say here, is a really valuable thing to do.
I think that's a really great sort of final thought to part on, Michelle. You know, there will be people, I have no doubt, who will harass you on LinkedIn off the back of this and want to hear more. Where can people get in touch with you to, one, obviously just connect with you, but also to get a bit more understanding of Realizer and the services you provide? Yeah,
sure. So, definitely find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at michelle@realizer.com.au.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your time. I think if you would indulge us, you know, do you maybe have one final parting thought on the topic of persuasive sales proposals that maybe the audience could take away and apply immediately this week? Make
the client's brand the hero of your proposal and presentation. So go back and look at your presentations. Often, I think media sales, we fall into the trap of our company and our products being the hero, but go back and make the client the hero. So it's about them and their challenge and their journey, and you as the media sales are just there to support them, achieve their goals. And so really go back and look at your proposals and, say, is the client the hero of this presentation?
I love that. Well, Michelle Pitt, thank you so much for your time. This was a great chat. I definitely think I'd love to have you back on in future, as I'm sure we'll have many, many more follow-up questions. But thank you for making the time and joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. Head to MediaSalesMastery.com to help pick the topic, guide the show, and don't forget to subscribe to receive new episodes each week.